Hello, and welcome to week 5. This week we're going to be talking about picture books, easy readers, and transitional books. You will notice there's no picture of me because I'm recording this on the snow day, and as I didn't have to go into work, I did not put makeup on or do my hair, and I'm in comfy clothes, so you don't get to see me, which may be a good thing. But we're going to talk about picture books, easy readers, and transitional books, some of my favorite books. Well, everything's my favorite book. But I'm going to break it down into different types of picture books and give a few examples of each. And a lot of these are interchangeable, but it just gives you an idea of the breadth of the types of picture books that are out there. So one type of book that's very popular is the ABC book. This book is called Z is for Moose, and when Moose wants to get into the act, mayhem ensues. And you can see that he is in there with Z and D and S and wants to be in all the pictures, and then when they get the M, they pick M as for mouse. So it's Paul Zelinsky, who you'll see that he does a lot of great art. I believe he's won a Caldecott for Rapunzel, which is done in a much more serious vein, but it's written by Kelly Bingham. And you can see that you'll often see some of the ABC books are supposedly to help children learn their alphabets. Others are created as a way of organizing a topic. Catherine Kroll did one called M for Music, and it's an A to Z of musical terms. So there's different ways that you'll see ABC books put together. Counting books are another popular picture book type. This one's by Anthony Brown, One Gorilla. I just think his illustrations of the gorillas in this are beautiful. There's some great math books like John Sheska, and Lane's Math Curse, as well as books that include Zero or Count Past 10. This one had just, I think really brilliant illustrations of primates. And the last page of this shows people of every color. I just really like that. I also like this book. I think I mentioned it in the awards slides that I did. Baby Goes to Market, and Baby is being given things as they go through this gorgeous market. Both of the illustrator and the author have roots in Africa, and this is such a beautiful, colorful book. As they go through the market, Baby is being given things by different people in the market, such as 6 bananas, and Baby eats one and then puts the 5 bananas in Mom's basket on her head, and Mom's basket's getting heavier and heavier, and she's not paying attention because she's doing her marketing, and in the end she discovers all of these wonderful things that are in her, that Baby has put in her hat. But one of the things I really like about this, in addition to the multicultural aspects of it and just the beauty of the illustrations and the brightness of the illustrations, is that it counts backwards and does subtraction, which I think is really unusual in a picture book, because each item that the baby gets, he takes one, so they say 6 bananas. Baby takes one and puts 5 in Mom's basket. So it's really, I think, an advanced concept for this simple of a book that introduces it in a lovely way. Concept books introduce single concepts. Actually, the 2 books that we looked at before, the counting books and the ABC books, are also concept books, but it can do something a little more intangible, like More, Fewer, and Less. This is an old Tanya Hoban book. She did books with lovely illustrations. A more in-depth concept book is really a nonfiction or informational book, like this one, A Little Book of Sloth, which gives a lot of information on one concept or thing, and that's sloths, an animal in this case. This one is an interesting nonfiction book that is a very sparse picture book, but also goes into animal habitats. And I love the illustrations. This illustrator, Il Sung Na, who also wrote this, I just think his illustrations are quirky and fun. And the bear is trying to find a place to sleep, and he visits other animals, and in doing so learns in very simple terms about their habitats, and then comes back to his own place, and it's the best place for him. The water doesn't work for him, and other places don't work for him. So it's a lovely book. And then you can have more information books, nonfiction books that are more in depth. This one is interesting because even though it looks very simple and is a picture book, it is for a little older audience, I think. It's a librarian at Basra, and it's a true story of a librarian in Iraq who, when this picture didn't come out right, but is trying to save all the books. Everything's getting bombed. ISIS, or it wasn't ISIS at that point, but the Taliban was attacking cultural institutions, which a library would include many books that they might not want to be shared or to continue to stay. So the librarian was taking books home every night and hiding them in different places, so hoping to keep them safe. And the illustrations here, there's not much text on each page, but you can see the illustrations, and the whole topic is a little intense. The one on the left, I'd be a little careful who I shared it with, especially if you have immigrants or students coming from different places that might, this might scare. But it's a very good book and a good informational book, and it can be well used with other age levels. And Jeanette Winter does a lot of these very interesting topics in nonfiction picture book style. Participation books are books where the involvement goes beyond just reading the book, but you're looking for things, flaps, hidden objects. It can include books like I Spy and Where's Waldo. This book, everything in the pictures are made out of common objects. Like, this is a watch here. This is a compass. There's a spool of thread. So, this can be a very participatory book in that students can be looking for the hidden objects in the book. So it's not just kind of a book that you read and explore the pictures in terms of visually what they say, but you're exploring them in terms of finding things. And then interactive books, the classic interactive book is Pat the Bunny, where you actually have a little puff when you get to the picture of the bunny, a little puff of its tail, and you have, I think, like sandpaper. So there's a tactile and interactive portion to this type of picture book, very much for the younger audience, although it could be, in kindergarten, you could still be using this preschool and kindergarten, you could still be using this. It is in kind of a participation book also, but it's because they're interactive. So I'm going to say this many times throughout talking about books. I'm presenting books to you in genres, but genres are very artificially made up categories that are convenient ways to group books. And the same is here in the way I'm presenting these books. They're convenient categories just to examine certain types of books, but they certainly bleed over into each other's categories, and there's nothing hard and fast about saying this has to be considered this type of book. It's just an artificial construct to present these to you. Wordless picture books. This is won the Caldecott Medal. It's by Jerry Pinkney. It is a gorgeous, I'm sorry, my mouse is really giving me fits today. It is a gorgeously illustrated, almost wordless picture book. The only words in it are those, is that onomatopoeia? Sounds, screech, and tells the Aesop's fable in this wordless picture story format. It's consciously sent, Jerry Pinkney consciously set this in the African Serengeti of Tanzania and Kenya, which he has visited. And as it should be, since it's a story of a lion and a mouse and where we find lions, but it's just so beautifully, beautifully done and gorgeously set here. And some wordless books, like David Weisner's books, somebody else mentioned a book, another wordless book in one of your reading logs, I can't remember which it was, that they're great for the lion and the mouse has its own story, and because you're familiar with that story, you can read it, quote unquote, read it through that picture book. Although there might be some children who have not been introduced to that book. This one, Weisner's books, this one's Flotsam, and his books could be more of a prompt for writing, because there's so much visually going on without being explained. And basically what happens here is a little boy is on the beach, and a camera washes up on the beach with him. And unfortunately it stops here. And there's a picture of the author, who obviously loved beaches and cameras. But in the camera he finds images such as this one, which is just so rich and so much going on in this. And it'd be wonderful to have kids use this single image as a writing prompt and come up with their own story from that prompt. And I just think it's wonderful. They're just wonderful to enjoy also. You could even do it as a practice, a way of telling a story. What do you think happened before this image? What do you think happened? So we could get sequencing in there. And there's a lot you could do with a picture book like this. Predictable books have some kind of repeat. They're also called pattern books, like The Old Lady Who Swallowed a Fly. This one is if you give a moose a muffin. It started with if you give a mouse a cookie, and you go, that phrase repeats itself. If you give a moose a, or there was an old lady who swallowed, and so they're kind of predictable with a different finishing phrase each time. It's good for developing literacy because the kids kind of know what to expect. If you give a moose a, and then they know that there's some kind of consequence. Picture storybooks, a lot of what we've looked at are picture storybooks, but basically it's a story and an image working together to tell the story. It's great to read to children, and it's a great foundation for literacy training because you can match and the words and pictures, reading both of them together, make the full story. And the illustrations can define and develop the characters in addition to the text. So the pictures reinforce the text, they extend or develop the plot, they establish the setting and the mood, provide interesting asides. If you think about, Jan Brett likes to do these books, and there's somebody else that's doing them now too. She did this with the Mitten, which is a classic story of a girl losing a mitten in the forest, and animals one by one come into the mitten until it gets bigger and bigger. Animals come in and get so full they all burst out of the mitten. But she uses the border around her each image, the 2-page image, to give a preview of the next animal coming into the mitten. So that's kind of an aside and something else to look for. There could be other little stories. Not often, but there's some illustrators who will have a certain feature on every page that if you know it's there, you can go and look at. This is I love Tacky the Penguin. It's a great story about it being okay to be different. And Tacky lives on this island with his companions, goodly, lovely, angel, neatly, and perfect. And you can see how the text and the words reinforce each other. So you can guess by their names what they're going to look like, but the text reinforces it. And his name was Tacky, and Tacky was an odd bird. And see, the text and the pictures work together to reinforce it. So Tacky goes his own way and does his own thing, and I just adore Tacky. I think it's a great book for to read during bullying week, because if somebody's different, it's okay. They don't always have to be the same as everybody else. And of course, in this book, in the end, Tacky saves the day, which they don't even need to save the day in order for people to be considered important and taken and appreciated for who they are, but it's just a lovely story. This is one of the 2 books that I've given you as a possible read for this week, one of your required reads. And Kadir Nelson, I just think he does the most amazing images for his books. He's got quite several of them out now, and they're just gorgeous illustrations. And this one is a great character book. So if you plant a seed, what if you plant seeds of kindness or selfishness? So he integrates planting seeds with kindness, and it's just, the images are just amazing. There's one spread of all of these birds at eye level and just knocks me out. I had it open in my office for a while just because I wanted people to be struck by it as they came in the office. But again, this is one where the pictures, I mean, a lot of them do this. And again, it's just something to notice within a certain type of book. The most picture books are going to have this back and forth between the images and the pictures, but picture storybooks like this that are really meant to tell a story, not information or predictability or whatever, have this more concretely. You can really see this in these kinds of books. Engineered books are fun, not super fun to have in the library, but they're pop-up, lift the flap, sound books, even Eric Carley's Hungry Caterpillar with a hole through the different pages is a type of engineered book. Robert Sabuda is well known for these complicated engineered books that he puts together where you open the page and the spread opens up and the book pops to life. It's really nice to maybe use for story time. You've got to be a little careful and see how careful your students are with the books if you want to make them part of your circulating collection, and just be aware that they're not going to last as long perhaps as some other books. Board books are another kind of sort of, not quite an engineered book, but they are books on board that are made for the youngest who are not going to be gentle with paper. This is again this Il-Sung Na, who I just think his illustrations are gorgeous and evocative. I just really like his illustrations, but this is a board book called The Book of Sleep. It's become my new favorite book to give to at baby showers. So you can see it's a little young, but the board books can be great to keep in the library if you're worried, you know, if you have the youngest pre-K to K and you want, they can be knocked around a bit because they are sturdier. Illustrated books are books with a lot of text. They look like a picture book. They're going to have that picture storybook format where the pictures and the words are interdependent, but there's a lot of words. These are the books that if you read to your kids at night and you haven't looked carefully at what you picked out of the library, you might open one of these and say, oh, it's going to be a long night, because they have a lot of words, and often they will tackle more, they'll have a lot more description, a lot more action, and they'll tackle sometimes subjects that are a little bit more intense. So this is a book, this is Pink and Say by Patricia Polacco. Somebody included a Patricia Polacco book in their reading log. I just think her books are just so warm and so amazing. She tells a lot of books about her stories about her family and draws on family things that happened. This one actually is supposed to be about a great whatever grandfather, I don't know how many greats back, that was in the Civil War and came back from the Civil War, but was injured during the war. And so it tells a story of two. Her family member was the white, and I can never remember which is pink and which is Say, was the white character in this book, and he's injured on the fields and is found by the by the former slave, who's a former enslaved person who's also a member of the Union, who brings the other boy back to his mother's house, and they nurse him back to health. And then they're both captured and go to Anderson, I think the Andersonville camp, which was one of the notorious prisoner of war camps. I believe that's where they go. And so, needless to say, the African-American young man does not make it. And the white young man does get home to tell his story. But this is certainly something that you could use with an older, even, eighth graders, or read this out loud to them as an introduction to the Civil War and to some of it's a more personal story of the Civil War that can give them an entree into the topic. And many of these illustrated fiction are like this. Many libraries take these out and put them in a separate section so that they can be great for students who maybe are struggling readers who need the images to go along with them. And like I said, they're sometimes the subject matter's a little more advanced, so it doesn't feel as childish to them, but they still don't want to be going into the picture books necessarily to get a book like this. So having them in a separate section in your library could be, some people call them e-fiction or something, or illustrated books, or somehow if you separate them and put them in a different category, especially if you have teachers coming in to find this kind of book, it can be great. Okay. So next, to easy readers. Dick and Jane, I think I mentioned, it was popular from the 1930s to the 1970s. The Easy Readers, reissued in 2003, and 2.5 million copies sold when it was reissued. They are really rather prosaic books, but I think there was a bit of a nostalgia because, for example, I remember reading these when I first started reading. Not that I would, having been introduced to so many more marvelous and fun books, have subjected my children to them, but you could see that there's a bit of a nostalgia surrounding these books. You can probably also see how homogeneous the characters in these books are too. So The Cat in the Hat by Dr. Seuss was one of the first, it was in the first wave of new books that were more interesting, but that still kept the vocabulary to simple words, and so that, and repetition, so that kids could learn to read them. This was from 1957. In 1960, Seuss was challenged by his editor, Bennett Cerf, to write a book with no more than 50 distinct words. And 49 of the words in this book are a single syllable, and anywhere is the single multisyllabic word in the book. And so Green Eggs and Ham, which is a much more fun book, in my opinion, to read than Dick and Jane, but everybody's tastes are different. We have lovely books now like Elephant and Piggy by Mo Willems, who I think does amazing work. As you can see, he won a Theater-Sized Geisel. He's the very youngest of, for the very youngest of early readers, there's very few books on each page. Very few books, very few words on each page. a lot of visual. So it's very, it can make a early reader feel very successful. You can see there's just a few, some repeating words and very few words on their head, and still a nice story. So many of you probably already know this, but easy readers tend to be categorized 1, 2, 3, 4. And the problem with the 1, 2, 3, 4 is that every publisher has their own numbering system, but there's basically some very, very easy readers like this with very few words on the page. Then there's, and it's more complicated like this if you really know about reading, but I kind of developed in my, I developed just a 1, 2, 3 code. If you had very few words on a page, it was a 1. If it was somewhere in the middle, it had a 2. And if it was more advanced, it had a 3, just to help. I don't love labeling books, but it really helped parents pick out the right level book. And I'm not big on levels, but with these easy reader books where the kids are really trying to learn how to read, and if you get too many words and they're too small, they're really very frustrated. And I would by no means limit them if they saw a book that had more words on it and they were really interested in it. Because as we talked about, I believe under 2 weeks ago, that really can make them want to read. Being interested in a book above all else will be an indicator of how well a student will read a book, because if they're interested, they'll work a lot harder. Fly Guy and Super Fly Guy, or Fly Guy, has not a ton of words in each, and it's become very popular in our Garden State Book Awards. This one many, many times. Each year he'd come out with a new one, and it would win that year's series award. So very popular with the kids. Elephant Piggy, also very popular. And he's also got this new nonfiction easy reader, Fly Guy Presents, and they're simple books about topics. Some of the easy readers have gone to a kind of comic book format. And this is one where it looks to me, they're more panels than what you used to see in easy readers, but it's kind of a graphic novel, but still very simple reading level. I think this would be kind of a medium one because the words are smaller. If you notice, Elephant and Piggy has such big words. The words are much smaller here, but there's still not a ton of words. But it is appealing in that it's that graphic novel sort of, or comic book sort of format. So these have become, I've seen more and more of these coming out. Ling and Ting, very similar. This is one that I've asked you to read one of their series. And this is by Grace Lin, and about twins, and they're great for a great early reader. Sometimes they're called early readers, sometimes they're called easy readers. You'll see how this has kind of a few more words than more words certainly than Elephant and Piggy, but not as many words as some other books. It's such a, leveling things so hard. But like, again, I think that the reading level really makes, the reading interest, how interested they are in this, makes a big difference. And then I loved these, Mr. Putter and Tabby Walk the Dog. It's one of the few, Mr. Putter and Tabby, Cynthia Rylant also won all the time. And these have a few more words, again, a little more dense, more like Ling and Ting, but a little more dense. What's so interesting about these is they're one of the few books for children that don't feature any children at all. This is about Mr. Putter and his tabby, and Mrs. Teaberry and her dog, Zeke. And basically, it's just stories of them doing things. And it's just so interesting to me that this was popular with kids. My daughter still loves this. She's 30 and she still loves it. But had no, of course the animals are very appealing, but had no children in it. And then Henry and Mudge was the other huge series by Cynthia Rylant that was very popular. Little Bear is a very early easy reader. It has a few more words. It's a little more dense in the text, and tends to go into these chapters. You'll see the transition from one book when they're very young with the easy readers, which has one story in the whole book, to these almost transitional type easy readers that are divided into chapters and have more words on each page. So you can see a kind of a continuum along how many words are on a page, how spread out the words are, how involved the pictures are. And if you look really closely here, you can, and at the paw there, that's the one that really gets me, you can see reminiscence of Where the Wild Things Are, if you know where the wild things are, because these pictures were by Maurice Sendak. But this is an I Can Read book, and it was a format that was new at the time, that now is kind of a standard size. For a long time was a standard size of an easy reader. They're a little bit more up and down rectangular than picture books, which tend to go horizontally. These are more vertical, although now they're starting to get away from this size, which drives me crazy, especially when I'm doing the book sale and trying to put all the books together, and then all of a sudden you come out with odd size books. And you can see how the I Can Read books have level 1, level 2, level 3, and then I Can Read chapter books, which I'm calling here transitional books. And there's things like Mercy Watson to the Rescue, where you get into the next level of readers where kids can begin to feel like they're reading a chapter book. There's a lot more, more words on the page. The words are smaller, less white space, but there's still images to help them interpret some of the words, and it's not so long that they get frustrated. And this is Kate DiCamillo, who does wonderful books, very warm and lovely books. But these transitional books are the next step up. Amber Brown, this Lulu and the Hamster, another Kate DiCamillo it's a different series, Mercy Watson, but it's the same. Decawoo Drive is the same. Leroy Ninker is with Mercy Watson on the same road. So there's some wonderful these transitional chapter books. So I'm rather poorly trying to get to the idea, which some of you probably already know if you're dealing with these books for elementary school students, the kind of progression along which these books take children in order to meet their needs in a very visual way as they learn how to read independently. And I actually like some of these books more than I like middle grade books for some reason. There's an appeal to them, I think because they're closer to picture books and they can be a lot of fun. Not that middle grade books can't be, but there's something very appealing about them, but they're also very necessary. And I found what happens is kids often quickly go through these and move up the stages very quickly, and they're, I think, among the most borrowed books in the library because you simply cannot keep up with children when they're reading at this stage. How many of these books they can read and how many they need to read to become fluent more fluent readers and move up to that next chapter book level where they begin more intense reading. So that's picture books, easy readers, and transitional books or transitional chapter books in a nutshell. Probably more information than you wanted to know and a lot that you already did know, but I'm having you read some this week in case you're not familiar with them because you've been working with a lot older books. So those would be the people who get the most out of this lecture, I'm sure. So enough of me talking. I will see you on the discussion board and have a great week.